persistence is a superpower. And once you've ditched those self-limiting beliefs, your persistence becomes your measure of your belief in yourself. So be that irresistible force. Change your environment through persistence and purpose. Be purposeful. You'll never leave footprints if you're walking on tiptoe. Persistence matters. Nothing in the world can take its place. Talent won't. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent.
Welcome to the show. Thank you for listening. Get ready for one of the best episodes we've ever had. We have a big wig of real estate on today. 22,000 apartment units that he made, the most beautiful hotel in California, Pelican Hill Resort. It's a rags to riches story from London to America. We've got Chris Marsh on the show today. We're going to talk not just about real estate, but to how to achieve your dreams, why to live purposely, and using yourself to find your freedom. This is a good one. Subscribe, tell your buddies. Welcome to the show and welcome to the Edge of Excellence. Well, Chris Marsh, I actually didn't ask you to come on the show we've been doing this for 5 years. I have never asked you because I know you're too damn busy and you got too much going on, but you fell prey at some party we were at. And I want to say thank you so much for making time to share your story and your path to real estate stardom. Welcome to the show. Thank you for being here.
Absolute delight to be here, Matt, and congrats on the podcast. I just assumed you got to the bottom of the list here, so fair enough. But yeah, delighted to be here.
By the way, we're going to be marketing this as the Gordon Ramsay show. As long as people don't listen to what we talk about, you look exactly like Gordon Ramsay today. I also, before we get started, and we got a lot to talk about, but yesterday, coincidentally,
look at you.
Yesterday, I found my passport, my British passport, and I went online and applied for a new British passport. So we got two Brits here today, one from Essex and one from Leeds. Neither of them the greatest place in England. This is going to be an exciting show. I don't have the accent, but I do have Chris on here, and we're going to get into his corporate success, which is kind of the pinnacle of corporate success in real estate. We're going to get into founding Cherry Tree Partners, Capital Partners, and becoming a real estate entrepreneur. And we're going to even get into his amazing charitable impact, which is where we met. We were on the board together of a wonderful school. Shout out to St. Mary's School. But before we do, Chris, I got to know, what's your definition of excellence?
Well, perhaps I'll start with what it isn't. Excellence is not mere success or achievement. It goes way beyond that. It may be in some part or even large part, ultimately what caused you to be successful. But it's important to understand, I think, that it has component features that certainly I found to be true in those excellent leaders, such as your good self, my friend, that I've emulated in my career. And so when I think about what defines excellence, I think it's all about consistency and intentionality. Excellence is always, by definition, a sustained and quality effort over time, not just a single great effort. Examples of this exist throughout industry, sports, you name it. Those that have done better consistently the most have worked very hard and very intentionally for a very long time. And I think it's particularly important takeaway today, in these times, I should say, where we increasingly live in a world defined by instant gratification and correspondingly high expectations of success and rapid career advancement. And, I think we're wise to remember the only time success comes before work is in the dictionary. And those that can develop a capacity for sustained hard work and to be consistently striving and learning will build a life beyond their imagination. I think it was Gladwell who popularized the 10,000 hour rule, in that it requires 10,000 hours of experience in a given field or discipline to become expert. except that on its face is not true. And as evidence of that, I've personally been driving for over 40 years and have accrued well over 10,000 hours behind a wheel. But if you drop me into the F1 grid at Monaco this weekend, my lack of expertise as a professional driver would be manifest for all to see. So it's the 10,000 hour rule is about 10,000 hours of deliberate practice. And that means a deliberate commitment to doing one's best in thought, in action, and execution for many, many years. It means actively engaging feedback and working on areas of weakness to fulfill your unique potential. Quick story, Matt. I was fortunate enough in 2006 to go to the Masters to watch the tournament in Augusta, and like seemingly every other spectator that day, I was following Tiger Woods around the course. He'd already had 4 green jackets to his name, and of course entered the competition as the favorite to win again. But on the back 9 of the last day, his putting let him down badly, and he tied for 3rd in the end on that day. He later referenced that as his most disappointing loss ever, as his dad, Earl, was very ill in hospital, and Tiger knew his dad, might never see him play again. Indeed, Earl Woods died 3 weeks later, I believe. So here's Tiger, who at the peak of his powers was probably the greatest living exponent of the game that we've ever seen. He was also the hardest working. So guess what he did? Because I followed him. Guess what he did after he finished his disappointing round? He hit the practice green to work on his putting for 2 hours. Yeah. I watched him. The best golfer in the world decided he needed to practice more. Nobody else was there, but he was. And so intentionality and a constant desire to learn, refine, evolve is vital to excellence. You go where you aim in life. So be intentional, therefore, about what you aim at. And I think another component, frankly, that gets talked about perhaps a little less in context of excellence is integrity. Simply put, doing what is right, even when nobody else is watching, or perhaps especially when nobody else is watching. Being morally bound in a world that can sometimes feel morally bankrupt, rising above the fray, knowing and following your true north in this regard is I believe, a hallmark of excellence. And that requires, of course, that you know your values. And so I would say to the audience, be intentional about writing down your values. Come up with a mission statement for yourself. Come up with a vision statement. Do this with your family if it feels appropriate. I can't think of a single company that can't point to a mission statement, probably framed on the wall somewhere, or some articulation of what they fundamentally stand for as a company. Yet when it comes to ourselves, we rarely commit to any articulated set of values. We often assume we know them or they're in our head, but I would put it to people that maybe you don't, not truly. So do the work, dig deep. What do you value? Think about it and think deeply. Thinking is really hard to do, real thinking. Yeah. And it means bringing yourself to task. It means holding yourself accountable. You have to see through the shadows and do some deep work on yourself to arrive at a well-articulated set of values and then have the courage to live by them. But I would say it's a worthy task, and they'll serve to underpin every decision you make in life. And that is acting with integrity. And I think integrity is foundational to excellence. And perhaps a last point, and this is a very long answer to your simple question, but
it's a good answer though.
It's an important topic. I think excellence is impactful. I think both in being impactful of itself and providing impact to others. It motivates and inspires others. Tiger inspired me on that day. Yeah. It's a benchmark to aim at. It models optimal behavior. So choose to be excellent, and others will notice. And that's vital when you're starting out on your career, when you're building a career. You want to be paid more? Sure you do. Well, do more than that for which you're being paid. You getting paid more is not the boss's responsibility. It's yours. Have the courage, have the mental fortitude to tackle a hard problem that nobody else is tackling. Make yourself valuable and ultimately indispensable to your employer or client or partner. It takes courage to act with a level of self-belief that perhaps at a young age you don't yet have. What's the saying? Feel the fear and do it anyway. I mean, be prepared to fail and do it anyway. Fail forward. How the hell else are you going to learn? You know, I had a career, and we'll come to talk about this, I'm sure, Matt, but in real estate development, where Donald Bren, considered an icon in that world, was looking for someone to run the Pelican Hill Resort project. No one wanted the role. I wasn't the only person offered the role, and not because it wasn't prestigious or potentially rewarding work, but because the consequences of failure were absolute. Were absolute. You'd lose your job and possibly mar your career forever. You know, doing the hard thing, especially one without a playbook, is not an easy choice. But then nothing worthwhile is ever easy. And as it happens, my decision to step into that role ended up changing the trajectory of my entire career. And of course, I didn't get to know that at the time. You never do. As Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots when you look backwards. You'll never know when such an opportunity comes to you, because it's always dressed up as hard work and often the last thing you want to do. It's rarely conveniently spelled out as the next rung on the career ladder. You just have to take a chance, and sometimes on blind faith. And so here's was a massive challenge that nobody else was willing to take on. So I took it. I abandoned my relatively safe and established role for one with no known outcome. And that's truly become a repetitive theme in my life, from leaving my first job to go to college, to emigrating to the United States, to without knowing a soul in real estate, to everything that's followed in my life. So sort of adopting a mindset and practice of being your best on purpose over time, no matter what, doing it with grit, with courage, with commitment, with resilience, with intentionality. Do that for 10 years and look up and check the results. And you'll be glad you did the work, and better yet, you'll own it.
In everything. So I'm gonna expand on a couple of things, unpack a couple of things. One, in everything. So you said consistency, intentionality, hard work. I love that the only time success comes before work is in the dictionary. I almost gave you a yellow card for that. yellow card for because, oh my God, we got to start working hard. My wife was making a cake. And, you know, she's great making cakes, and she doesn't have the energy right now. She doesn't want to do it. And it's one of Jake's friends' girlfriend's birthdays. And she picked the hardest cake to make. And Jill said, I'm just going to do a little bit of a quicker job. And I'm like, shocked. Like, no, you're not. She's like, yeah, you know, I'm not. Because it doesn't matter if it's free. It doesn't matter if Chris and I are working at a charity, if we're doing a podcast to help people out, or if we're at work. It's always the same. And I also want to pull out that 10,000 hours, because you have improved on Gladwell. It's not 10,000 hours, 5 years of full-time work. What you said was purposeful and intentional. So the driving's a great analogy. We're not purposely driving. We're not intentionally driving. We're doing other things. We're not focused on becoming the greatest driver. The 10,000 hours, you want 10,000 hours and become an expert in real estate? You've got to go study and read. And it's not just going to work for 13 hours that day. You're only getting credit for 2 or 3 of those hours where you're really getting deep into the purposeful study and growth. I want to back up a little bit, and we'll just do a couple plugs here. You mentioned Donald Bren, 18-year career at the Irvine Company, where Chris ended up as president of the apartment division. And Irvine Company is the company that invented the neighborhood and invented really this mass community development that you see all Cherry Hills, Colorado, invented by the Irvine Company. And Chris, by the way, just to put some numbers behind it, from 40,000 units to 62,000 units. So 62,000 units. 10,000 units is a ton of properties. That's billions of dollars. Master development of 4 million square feet of mixed use in Santa Clara Square alone. Now he's got Cherry Tree. He left this unbelievable job as high as you can get in real estate and went and started his own business because he's chasing excellence. He's consistent. He's intentional. He wants to experience and become an expert in a different side of real estate. Had to go raise money, partnered with, I believe, Bain, right, for some financing.
Yes.
You don't get to do that if you don't have the pedigree. So this is the stuff that Chris has done, but it all started a long time ago in Leeds, right? In Leeds.
You got the wrong side of the Pennines, Matt.
I always say it's Leeds. Why every time I talk to you, do I think you live in Leeds? Why do I think that?
I'll give you the credit that it's probably the nearest largest city, but Leeds is in
Oh,
Yorkshire. I grew up in Lancashire, and my hometown is Blackburn. And the audience can be forgiven for I've never heard of never heard of Blackburn. It's an old it's a old cotton mill town in northern England. So yeah, that's where I grew up.
and my family is from York originally.
Yeah.
And my mother grew up in Woodford Green outside of Essex. And I don't know if I think I told you this before, but you and my mother at different times both went to the University of Reading.
Yeah. Yeah.
Both alumni of Reading. It's amazing. So you had a different upbringing than a lot of people that listen to this. One, because we're a little bit older than them and we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have internet. We didn't have to deal with those pressures and that struggle. Two, you're in a different country. So what was life like? Were you trying to get ahead? Were you focused on real estate? What was going on in your young years and then into college?
Well, so I grew up the son of two cotton mill workers. It was a very hand-to-mouth existence, a truly working class household, pridefully so, by the way. A lot of great values established then, but we grew up with very little means. And I think, as Larry Ellison once said, I had all the disadvantages to be successful. There's no option but to go get it. But at high school, I hadn't yet realized that education was ultimately going to be my pathway out of my current circumstances. Because, when there is no money, it's all you can think about. And the need for money was too acute and pressing a need to allow anything else to enjoy priority in my thinking at that time. Mercifully, it shifted since, but at that time, and by the way, high school in the UK at that time, and perhaps currently, is something you encounter at 11 years old. Yeah. So you're still rather young. So I had to focus on earning money, and school wasn't paying much, So at 12 years old, I started a couple of paper rounds, and by 14, I was working several days a week before and after school on what they used to call an open air market, which is exactly what it says it is. Still a concept in those days, and super fun in Northern England, where famously
open air is great there.
Oh yeah, there's only two seasons famously in Northern England: June and winter. And it was tough work. And you graduated high school back when I attended at 16. Still relatively young, and so I went to the careers office with frankly no intention of sitting another exam in my life. And they had a number of what were called back in the day YTS openings, and YTS was a Margaret Thatcher initiative youth training scheme, really designed to help bring down youth unemployment, which was stratospheric at the time. And it basically meant the government paid employers to employ you in a temporary, albeit full-time job for 2 years. And so I started work in an office, suit and tie, at 16 years old, earning the princely income of £36.25 a week, or £1,450 a year. That's about $2,000 a year. And the hope, of course, is that at the end of 2 years, it converts to a real job. I got a job as a trainee quantity surveyor, and I'm still not sure I can tell you what that means for a local city hall, but it's a job that required me to walk 6 miles a day to get to that job for the 2 years before I could afford a car. And to my horror, as I was interviewing for the job, I was told that I'd be required to attend the local technical college for a day a week. And that day would be a 12-hour day, and it would be 5 years. But I can now say that college combined with work experience was utterly transformative for me. I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do when I left school. I fell into real estate. But here I am now, 5 years on, at 21 years old, earning more than my dad ever did in the factory by some considerable margin. But I found my career path in real estate. And what that meant was I knew enough by then to know what little I knew and to understand the value of continuing at college to a degree. So I quit my job, huge move at the time, and attended college full time. That was Birmingham University.
Okay, so let's just take a quick break, just so people that aren't from Britain get this down. At 16, you take these tests, and you decide which path you're going to go to. Some people go the apprenticeship path. Some people go what's called college in England, and college is for when you're 16 and 17. When you're done with college, which usually is a full-time job, you're doing it 1 day a week for 5 years instead of every day for 2 years with summer breaks and stuff. When you're done with college, you then decide if you're going to go to university. So you get this job as a trainee quality surveyor. They send you once a week to get this technical training. You're in like technicals, junior and senior year of high school, 1 day a week, but it's going to stretch out. And then you quit that and decided to go to university. Is that right?
That's right. You got it bang on, Matt.
Okay.
3 years later, I graduated with a first-class honors degree from university and was bound for a postgrad program at the aforementioned University of Reading. A very
Reading.
reputable, yeah, and a great college or university for real estate in the UK.
Okay.
And so, as I reflect on the difference between the 21-year-old that earned the first-class honors degree in the university's history and the high school kid who struggled to even show up for class, was one of focus combined with intentional application. And you just keep coming back to that as the hallmark of excellence. In high school, I was focused, all right, but I was focused on making money. And school was not a paid endeavor. So by the time I attended university full time, I was focused on building a career. And that's a career I've enjoyed ever since. And I can now truly say I was on my way to excellence at that time.
And so the quality surveyor may not have been the
quantity surveyor. Yeah,
may not have been the job you wanted, may not have been the career you wanted, but it opened your eyes and opened your doors. And it didn't open your eyes to what maybe people think, oh, I don't want this job, or I do want this job. It opened your eyes to, I need to change my path. If I want that end, I needed a different path.
Absolutely.
And at what point in time did you join MI6 and start making movies? It's very strange how much you look like the guy from James Bond, Daniel something or other. You look exactly like him. And then today, like Gordon Ramsay. It must be, I think all British people look alike.
That could be it. We also have a castle each, by the way.
Oh, that's true. I need to come visit that thing. One of my goals is to get a house in Huntington Abbots outside of Cambridge and live there for 1 year, live the village lifestyle. I'm going to be banging on your door in Leeds, bored out of my mind, borrowing jackets. So let's get back to your story. So you finish up at Reading. You've got, what was your degree? It was a real estate degree. What was it called?
Yeah, it was a master's in project management.
Okay, so master's in project management. Yeah. So the college, actually, you went to college, you went to university, you went to grad school.
Yeah.
And then something happened and a beam came down from the sky and you moved into my life and came to California. What was the path to Irvine Company then after that?
Well, let me firstly, perhaps, because I'm sure many are wondering about real estate, and I mean, there are 1,000 different roles, as you well know, Matt, in real estate and real estate development specifically, which is what I spent a career doing, and they all demand very different skill sets. So there is no, what are you got to be excellent at to be excellent at real estate? There's no single answer, because it depends. It depends on the actual role you want to perform. But I do think a takeaway is, what was important for me, and perhaps to better explain why I ended up even doing a postgrad at all, is that I think a primary skill to develop early in your career is to fully understand what you're good at, what do you enjoy, what holds your attention, and I felt it was important to define that pretty early on. You may not have the option to pursue that right now, but pay attention to what you truly enjoy, and frankly, that which you don't, because what truly engages you to the point where you lose track of time versus what causes you to count the hours is going to matter. A career is a long time to be doing something that you dislike, and you hear this all the time. But for me, it was really thinking about, well, truly what I wanted to be when I grew up and why, perhaps more importantly. So for me, for example, this may not surprise you, Matt, but I've never been particularly detail person.
Yeah,
And there are
more
times.
power to us.
Well, there are times, of course, when the role or the project you're working on demands radical focus on detail,
Mhm.
especially early in your career when you're perhaps learning a specific skill or trade.
Mhm.
But I've never personally enjoyed that aspect. I was
Mhm.
always drawn to a bigger picture, kind of the strategic overview of a process or a project, preferring to bring together talented people way smarter than me in specific disciplines and lead them to a successful outcome. Because almost whatever you're doing in life, the sum is always bigger than the parts. And when you get it right as a leader, and you're the one responsible for taking this raw talent and crafting a team and a vision around a project or a process, that's a huge responsibility, but it's hugely rewarding. So I had to be patient, right? You don't get to just lead others when you come out of college.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
but knowing what I wanted to ultimately do was important. And, again, that intentionality, setting that intention after college to focus on becoming a project manager, the guy who's responsible for absolutely nothing precisely and everything otherwise. And it took me a while, but my first opportunity in project management was at 28 years old. I was still in the UK, and it was working for a retail developer. So I started developing shopping centers and pulling together teams to do just that. And it gives you skills that are applicable to many situations. I've always loved the Steve Jobs metaphor for how he saw his role at Apple as being analogous to the orchestra conductor, and that's how I view it. Sort of bringing together the talents, infinite talents of others to create a cohesive and harmonious whole. I don't know Steve Jobs. I didn't know Steve Jobs personally, but I'm pretty confident he couldn't play an instrument as well as any of the people, in the
Yeah,
orchestra. But at the same
yeah,
time, look at what he did. One of
yeah.
the most successful companies on the planet. So I can't tell you how rewarding that work is and how varied it gets to be. And that's why real estate development ended up being perfect for me. It demands the collective efforts of sometimes hundreds of professionals of many disciplines, and in turn leadership, to make all that happen towards, to come towards a common goal.
And we were just talking about that too. It's the exploration. It's the try things I don't like it. And it's what Chris said. It's not about what job do I like? What job do I not like? What do I like about this? And where does that occur most often? Because we got to get detailed. We got to do accounting. We got to do things we don't like, but not most of the time. So there's the exploration phase, which all my guests talk about, trying different things, usually some things they don't like, some things it just starts, their gut starts to talk to them. You mentioned patience. There's the patience phase, and don't think you're not going to retire by the time you're 25. You're not going to have it figured out next year. And then there's the third thing, picking a path. And if you are consistent, intentional, hardworking, have integrity, you pick a path and you follow that path. It may not be the right path, and you're the third person I've had talking about real estate that picked the project management path. Analyst, I think, is the other main path. Like, you and I would be horrible as analysts, so we would have been on the wrong path and then switch. But you pick a path, and then maybe you find out, you know what, real estate development is not right for me. I don't like this sort of thing, but you still have that experience to go use somewhere else. So you pick the path of project management. You started out there in England. How'd you get over here?
So I got a younger kid sister,
Ah.
who started her career with uh, Arthur Anderson back in the day. Many of your audience won't know who they are, but they were a top tier accounting, global accounting firm. She started with them. She met a guy in London who happened to be a Brit but lived in California.
Oh no.
And then, rather uncharacteristically for her, because for all the time I spent avoiding school, she was the straight A student. She announced that she was quitting Arthur Anderson and going to live in California.
Hmm.
And so all of a sudden, I started showing a lot more interest in my sister's life because I was coming out to, and not just California, Manhattan Beach,
Oh,
California.
okay. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, the working class kid from Blackburn was getting off the plane and showing up in Manhattan Beach. And immediately I started thinking, how do I get here?
Yeah.
Um,
What year,
and
what year was it?
That when I first started visiting was like 96, 97. By the time I'd, squirreled away enough acorns to actually afford to make the leap of truly not knowing anyone in real estate in the whole of the United States,
Yeah.
not having a career path at all, not so much as having a work visa, just coming out on a tourist visa and hoping for the best. And Matt, I saved what was for me a lot of money at the time, enough I thought to at least allow for a year of living in California.
Oh,
And
yeah.
suffice to say, 3 months later, I was flat broke,
Yeah.
living in a basement bedroom of an alcoholic spinster, God bless her, in Redondo Beach, down to my last few $100. I've been applying for jobs in LA. People very generous with their time, but nothing materialized in terms of a job. And I actually just started to apply for jobs back in the UK. And I literally got a call out of the blue from the president of the retail division at Irvine Company.
Oh my God.
Who had got my resume from an architect that he used in common with a different architect from some guy I'd given my resume to 3 months prior. And you talk about serendipity, and I went down, beyond the orange curtain, such as it was,
Never left.
and never left, never left.
So I don't know if you know this, but my 1993, I lived in Manhattan Beach, and I'm from New Mexico. So I show up in Manhattan Beach, and it's the same thing. And you said something earlier, like when you don't have money, that's all you think about.
Yeah.
Right. It's like, and you think about it for the wrong reasons. I'm going to buy this. I'm going to buy that.
Right.
And eventually you realize it doesn't matter. But when your parents are skipping meals like mine were, and everybody has more than you, like that was a major driving force. And I moved to Manhattan Beach, and I had a life-changing experience because my roommate didn't do anything. And I'd gotten him a job. And I went to South Central every day and built a factory for the guy that was best man at my parents' wedding. And we just had this breakaway. And then I had the same experience when I came down to Orange County. Like, oh my God, this is so shocking. So what was it? A network? What? Irvine Company was probably maybe the most in the top 10 most famous businesses in California. And Donald Bren, maybe the wealthiest person in California at the time. I don't remember. Mm-hmm. How did you get the president? Oh, and I just remember this too. You did that for one of my friends. You were the president, and you called her and helped her get a job and paid it forward. And she's actually been on the podcast, went off and has had a wonderful career. How do you get the president of the Irvine Company to call and offer you a job when you've been looking for a job? Most people nowadays, a year. What was the magic there?
Well, as I mentioned, the call itself was complete serendipity. I'd like to take some credit for it, but I can't. It was just my resume getting passed over. But when I was hired into the Irvine Company, and I was fortunate because I joined the company when Donald Bren was on an absolute ground up development tear across the entire company. So every asset class in the company was growing like topsy. And his preference was always to build it from scratch because he believed the brand of the company, it was inherent in the quality of what he did. And so I had this retail experience that I was coming fresh off the boat from England with. And so I got to work on, Crystal Cove Promenade was my first project. My job site trailer was sitting where the Javier's restaurant currently is. And here I am once again. Can't believe my luck. Working class kid from Northwest England, from a town no one's heard of, and my first job in the U.S. is sitting in a job trailer staring at the beautiful ocean. And I get to build this fantastic project. So Newport Coast Shopping Center, Spectrum Phase 4, other retail projects followed. I then got an opportunity in office development, so I said yes, please. Took that. Didn't have any office experience. Jump in, learn what you can.
So getting another 10,000 hours in a different variance, with intention, with consistency, with hard work.
Yep. It's the essence of sacrifice, right? Letting go of what you value most now to attain a better future. And that perversely, sacrifice allows you to take ownership and control of your life. And that's exactly what I did. And then the next opportunity I've already referenced, it was Pelican Hill Resort. It had taken over 20 years. And anyone who knows anything about developing in coastal California will appreciate this. And 20 years to get the entitlements for what is now Pelican Hill Resort.
Okay, so let's stop there. If you are going into real estate, the worst place to do it is California. And if you're doing it in California, the really worst place is the Laguna Beach, Newport area. So when Chris talks about entitlements, that's a whole different real estate job where you're negotiating with government entities and agencies to get the use of the land changed and to be able to do what you want. And it never takes 20 years. It should take maybe 6 months. But in Newport Beach, it took 20 years to build a gigantic golf course, one of the most premier golf courses in the whole United States, Pelican Hill Golf Course, and a beautiful 5-star resort. They just want it to be open space. They didn't want it to be used for anything else, right?
Exactly right. And so we made one of the promises we made to secure that entitlement was that, and this is going to sound a bit wonkish or technical, but no drop of rainfall would ever reach the ocean. So no drop of rainfall that fell on a newly created impervious surface, so a building or a road, would ever reach the ocean. So a little known fact about Pelican Hill is it's got, a number of subterranean aquifers that collect that water in the event of anything up to a 100-year storm, scrub that water, prime it back into the lakes that actually sit out there on the golf course, and it's used as irrigation water on the golf course when it's clean.
Wow.
So fun stuff. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this sort of came down from the C-suite that Donald was looking for someone to, quote, work alongside him.
How many rungs below him were you at the time?
As many as there is. I think I joined as a director of the company. So there's probably at least 7 or 8 rungs. And Donald, runs the company on direct dial with maybe a dozen people. That's about it. So beyond the rungs, there was just, he was in a different atmosphere than I was and had never heard of me, frankly. Why would he? But my boss at the time...
Because you're James Bond? I mean, does he not watch movies?
I prefer that to Gordon Ramsay. I just wish it were true.
Yeah.
And so I volunteered for this Mission Impossible and, got to work alongside one of the very best in the business, while at the same time he was really busy, creating in his own mind what it wanted to be. I mean, that was changing constantly. So it was definitely a trial by fire. I didn't have any hospitality experience whatsoever to my name, but then nobody else in the building did either, because one of the things Irvine Company hasn't really done is built hotels. It's one of the product groups that where they haven't been that active. And so, I pulled a team I ended up being 130 consultants together, talk about surrounding yourself with the best and the brightest and try and take his vision and articulate that into something that was actionable. And deliver it on time and on budget.
Wait. So you're sitting in charge. You got to build this giant. It's Google it. Don't do it right now while you're driving, but look up Pelican Hill Resort. It is spectacular. So you're working with Donald Brand. You didn't have employees of Irvine Company. You brought in 130 consultants.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, we relied, construction managers, et cetera, were employees of the company, but most consultants, because we didn't have the institutional knowledge as an organization. We had an operating group. So they, of course, helped us, establish the program for the resort, the contents, the room specifications, et cetera, but actually delivering on it was a work of many. I mean, we had, 3 or 4 colorists. We had 3 aromatherapists. We had multiple interior design. I mean, it was a cast of thousands and one of the hardest things I've ever done. But significantly for me, it was truly helpful and enlightening to learn something that served me in leadership going forward. And that is, be intentional about pulling in the very best and the brightest. Don't be fearful about hiring people that are brighter than you. That's a stupid mistake that many leaders make and end up, ruining their own career as a result. But be bold in those hires, set the vision, set the mission, and then be smart enough to step out of the way and make sure they have the resources to succeed and get out of the way. And that's a lot of what my job was, along with, of course, managing the boss's expectations, which tended to change quite a bit. But, he seemed happy 3.5 years later when we opened the resort. The one thing that I wasn't thanked for is being on time with the delivery of the resort, because on time meant we opened our doors 6 weeks after the Lehman collapse. which was dreadful timing to be opening, a five-star world-class.
Yashar, by the way, I did a podcast with Yashar, who was
Yeah.
on the hour before Chris, and there was a crossover. He graduated from Columbia with his real estate degree the day after the collapse.
Wow. Yeah. Well, his timing's as bad as mine then. But I mentioned that for a very specific reason. Again, to remind listeners, I took a massive risk, or what felt like a massive risk at the time, to take on this yet to be defined project, working alongside the chairman of one of the most prestigious real estate companies on the planet,
and a job that other people didn't want because they feared lack of success would get them eaten up and kicked out.
Right. They preferred the safe channel. Yeah. And I did all of that, and that became very important because what came next, as mentioned, was the GFC, the great financial crisis, global financial meltdown. Banks were failing by the day. And Donald did what most CEOs on the planet did at the time. He, focused on maintaining operational sustainability of the company and shedding anybody, a part of the team that wasn't necessarily mission critical. Well, that by definition just about includes everybody in development, design, entitlement. Anybody associated with real estate development is not going to be required if you are focused on just keeping the cash flow moving and keeping the buildings operational. Mm-hmm. And so, truly 80, 90% of folks in my area of expertise, broad area of expertise, were let go, unfortunately, from the company. And the overall company downsized by about 50% at that time. And so it was truly scorched earth. And again, part of the risk I'd taken on this project was we were never going to build another one. It was always going to be a one and done thing. Mm-hmm. So by definition, I didn't have a job to go to. Mm-hmm. But he kept me around. And he's not the type of person that would ever articulate why, but I'm only left assuming that I'd done something very complex for him, and I delivered successfully. And he saw true value in that capability, and then assumed that, probably he was going to have a use for me going forward. He didn't know what that was yet, to his credit, but he kept me around. And 2 years later, I get a phone call. I'm invited up to lunch with the man. I figure, he's probably not going to fire me and feed me, so this should be interesting. And he started to articulate this whole new renter cohort, creating an opportunity, that had been created out of the GFC. And Irvine Company has the cash, the courage, the land on ranch, ambition off ranch as well, by which we mean outside of Irvine, to go and grow the company at a time when we got the benefit of being first mover advantage at scale, because while many of the REITs saw the same demand profile, they couldn't recapitalize as quickly as he did. And I figured there was a reason he was telling me all this, who'd never built an apartment in his life. You'll gather there's a theme here. And he said, what do you think? I said, well, it sounds like we need to pull together an organization, because as mentioned, most of the people have been laid off. He said, that's right. Why don't you produce an org chart for me? He said, you've built apartments before, right? I said, Donald, I haven't, but I think it's more important that, I can build a team than swing a hammer. So why don't you let me take a shot at putting together an org chart, and we'll talk some more. And what followed from that, and was ultimately blessed by a board of directors at the company, was a $10 billion 22,000 unit ground up pipeline that took me 2 years to build a team that was 6 people when I started, because those were the only people left in the building, to 160 people 2 years later, and all the learnings that go with that. And I realized at that time that my role on the resort really transitioned from project management into more of a leadership capacity, where my ability to craft a great culture became more important than knowing how to stand up a building. So that's that. Yeah, and the rest, as they say, is history. 22,000 units, and that's how I ultimately became divisional president. When you're responsible for that kind of capital outlay, that's an executive position in the company. And I grew. I jumped up the ladder very quickly once that assignment had landed, and ultimately became divisional president, I think 6 or 7 years after joining the company. One of the youngest to do so at the time. I was about 40 years old. But just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. yeah, to be granted. And I wasn't the best qualified person for that job. The world was awash with people who could have done that job, who've been laid off from
Yeah.
their respective
Yeah.
companies. But my taking a chance on the resort, which is why I described it earlier as pivotal in my career, I can now look back and say that was the thing. Pelican Hill Resort was the thing that made the difference to him and therefore made the difference to me. Because we were bound by trust, once I'd succeeded there and enjoyed a great career and, went on to do other things, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah. So, first of all, I didn't realize that the Great Recession created the great boom in apartments. Now, I've seen the great boom in apartments. I didn't make that connection that there was a shift in how people lived. I also didn't know, and this is the big real estate players, they have this vision. They're usually pretty smart. They're usually have great experience, and then they have this vision of where things are going. And you have to, because you buy land, hold the land, develop it. In Irvine Company, they have 100-year plan. They're holding land for 100 years. You got to know when to build. What am I going to build? So I didn't realize that there was a change in the demographics of how people live and a shift to that more densely populated areas where people are living in apartments and shorter commutes to work and maybe even working from home. And I also didn't realize that there was a big a competition to get those places built. And Irvine Company just had the cash and ready to go.
And the courage, right? The cash and the courage.
Yeah, well, because they're predicting the future. You can predict it wrong.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to go by, I mentioned something earlier, Matt, that I feel it's important to share, especially with younger listeners, because it doesn't often get said. But I mentioned this idea of sacrifice and necessarily giving up what you value now to attain a better future. If your life isn't going well, maybe it's because your goals or desires are misaligned. So become a chronic goal setter. Aim at something specific and tell yourself why. And the more why you can articulate, and you know this well, the better chance you have of succeeding. Saying you'd like to earn more money for the sake of earning more money is not exactly going to carry you forward when things get tough. Articulating specifically what life will look like for you and your family when you do will be entirely more powerful. And then do what's hard to get it and commit to that, because most people don't. But something resonated with me in this regard at an early age, and I think it was Brian Tracy, motivational speaker back in the day, who I was reading at the time. He talked about human beings having a success instinct for the most part. Animal kingdom, they have a survival instinct, but mercifully, certainly in the Western world at least, survival is something that we can now regard as a given, absent, of course, terminal illness or disease. So we have a success instinct by nature, and we come by that honestly. And so we shouldn't feel self-centered or selfish or materialistic about wanting to strive for better. It's a very healthy and human thing to want better. How on earth did we get here? If not through legions and generations of people wanting exactly that. Human beings have a natural inclination to aim up and want better for themselves and for their children. But we need to decide for us what success means personally. It might just be about money. There's way more to life. But it's a very personal thing. And this is where the golden stuff came in for me, because a fundamental part of defining that is really about getting to your values, as I mentioned, but principally ditching your self-limiting beliefs. And we all have self-limiting beliefs. We have beliefs about how good or bad we are in just about everything, from driving to skiing to communicating to math to sailing to our looks to singing to making love to knitting. You name it, we have beliefs about things we haven't even done. The problem is these self-limiting beliefs are self-limiting by definition because they are often ill-founded or flat out untrue. They're formed often very early in life and well before the age of discernment, yet we carry them around like a burdensome gunny sack for the rest of our lives. A belief may have come from a parent or a teacher's reprimand. It may have come from a sports coach or a sibling or a friend's throwaway comment, a former lover, a former or current boss. And it wouldn't matter if self-limiting beliefs didn't matter, but they do matter. They have a profound effect on us. And your entire self-concept, and I don't want to understate this, your entire self-concept as a human being, truly what you think of yourself, is the sum of all the self-limiting beliefs in all the areas of life that you believe are important for you. This is where the values come in. So perhaps the fact that you suck at knitting doesn't have much impact on your psyche or self-concept. But to be told early in life that, I don't know, you're ugly, you're dumb, you're weak, you're a poor communicator, is likely to be foundational to how you view yourself in the world and how you subsequently move in the world. So you need to allow for the fact that, as well established as those self-limiting beliefs are for you, they could well be wrong, and they could well all be wrong. And you have to challenge them, and you have to dump them. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. How do you challenge them? By practicing the tenets of excellence, by being intentional and dogged in pursuit of your goals, and to hell with self-limiting beliefs.
And you argue against them, because there's 7,000 of these self-limiting beliefs going through our head every day. Some people say 10,000. I've heard 5 to 10,000. And they're popping through there all the time. You're no good. I remember giving a speech one time and I knocked a water glass over, and I'm walking and I kicked the glass, and I'm on this big stage and it flies all the way across the room and shatters. First thing that pops in my head is, you're such an idiot. You can't let that happen. I stopped. I said, I'm not an idiot. I just kicked the glass. Who cares? I'm awesome. Let's crush the speech. Go. You've got to fight it. And I wanted to back up to that too, because you mentioned vision, mission, values. And I got to give you another yellow card for being a dork. You dorked out on the vision, mission, values. And I just know, because I spend my whole life with 20 somethings, that boom, turn the station. We're not listening to that. That's so dorky. I was one of them. Everyone we know, like everyone Chris and I know, is constantly setting goals like he's talking about. They're reviewing them constantly. Everyone we know has 3-year goal statements, 1-year plans, 3-year plans, 5-year plans. Not everyone we know has vision, mission, values written down, but most do. Chris has been to my house before where they were taped to the bar, unfortunately. And so my kids, for their whole life, are walking by the family vision, mission, values. It sounds a little crazy, but how do you figure out where you're going if you don't think about it? And it changes because you don't know where you're going. How do you get to where you're going if you don't stop and think about, where am I going? So I just want to give a quick exercise. Pause driving your car, pull over to the side of the road. The vision is where you're going. So you think, where do I want to be in 3 to 5 years? Friends, family, finance, fitness, faith are the 5 F's. Rituals, wealth, relationships, and achievements are the 4 pillars. You think about those things. Where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? And you come up with a vision statement. Mission is why. You sit down and think, why am I here? And you come up with a small statement. Values are the filter that you use to make your decisions. And people get value words wrong. Go just Google value words and pull out the ones that resonate with you, and then put it aside, come back to it, put it aside. And I'll say this, and this should be confidential, but it's not. My wife and I haven't had the greatest time in our marriage lately. Hasn't been the greatest. We're kind of like roommates. We're not in that phase of just awesome marriage, right? And when you've been married for 28 years, it goes up and down. I realize that you don't go to peak performance if you don't make a change when you're not at peak performance. And I realized I don't want to go back to therapy. I've been to that so many times. So I'm going to do an alternate to therapy, although I do endorse therapy and I've been many times. I'm going to go back to what I used to do and sit down with Jill and review our vision, mission, values, and our 3-year goals and our wheel of life. We used to do it every 6 months and use the alignment. And you were talking about building culture for a company. I mean, that's what you do in companies. You can do it for yourself and your family. And these self-limiting beliefs, they start to dissipate when you start to plot out where you're going to be and why you're going there and what you're standing for. And Chris and I, everyone we know does it, like everybody. And there's very few people you and I know that aren't doing that sort of thing.
That's well said, my friend, and thank you for sharing that. And you know, and what the common currency here, and hopefully this doesn't get me another yellow card, because I think then you're going to send me off. But is persistence. You know, persistence is a superpower, and once you've ditched those self-limiting beliefs, your persistence becomes your measure of your belief in yourself. So be that irresistible force. Change your environment through persistence and purpose. Be purposeful. You'll never leave footprints if you're walking on tiptoe. Persistence matters. Nothing in the world can take its place. Talent won't. Nothing is more common than unsuccessful people with talent. Genius won't. Unrewarded genius is almost a proverb. Education won't of itself. The world is full of derelict, educated people. Persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And it's certainly been a hallmark of what I consider to be my success, along with the grit and the resilience and mental fortitude that grow with it, to stay with it when things get tough, but to have that self-belief, that dogged self-belief. Grit beats genius every day.
Grit beats everything every day.
Amen.
There's just no way around it. If you're the most talented and you're the smartest and you're not charging and working hard and taking chances, eventually the people that aren't as smart and as talented as you will pass you up. Well, Chris, I know we're out of time. We did not at all get into Charity Tree Capital Partners, but let's just do a plug for it because it's awesome. You're building affordable housing for the masses of people that are working in the United States, focused in still Kansas.
Yeah, so we have an investment business where we're purchasing workforce housing in the Midwest, and then we have a ground-up development business that Matt mentioned earlier. That's with Bain Capital as a joint venture to develop attainably priced workforce housing here in Southern California. So we're 8 deals in with a pipeline and hope to do much more. But it's been a blast, and I launched Charity 3.5 years ago into one of the toughest capital market environments, and so far we're surviving and learning to thrive. So thank you for that, Matt.
Yeah, some people feel like they need to go make a bunch of money and then make a community impact. Other people realize you can make a community impact while you make money. So Chris has passion and has created a business that will help people while he's building a big business. It's a win-win. And we didn't get into the community service, but everybody understands your character just from this 1 hour of listening to you talk. Chris, I got to say thank you so much for making time. This is one of my favorite episodes ever. Thank you for coming on The Edge of Excellence.
Thank you, Matt. Always a pleasure. Stay well.
You too. Wake up.